I'm Ayodeji Ogunnaike. I'm a longtime fan of CSWR and professor of African and African American Studies at the University of Virginia. My research mostly focuses on Orisha worship from southwestern Nigeria and its kind of global spread in the modern era. I've been a big fan of the center since I was an undergraduate, and I started taking some classes at HDS and working with Professor Lupona in particular. Professor Lupona is the world's leading expert on Yoruba religious traditions, but also the center has a really interesting history within the field of religion in Africa. A number of really prominent scholars, I think Jeffrey Parender and more recently Afe Adogame, were very towering figures in that field, have all actually been visiting fellows or visiting scholars at CSWR. Um, and also, my work's been heavily influenced by Wilfred Cantwell Smith, who was one of the early directors of CSWR, in terms of thinking about how religion has its own, the term and category of religion has its own kind of very peculiar and funny history, very closely linked to the modern West, and how we should really think differently about what it is or what it could be in context outside of that. There's a workshop that I'll be leading, I believe, in the spring semester on the kind of pedagogy of the Yoruba tradition of Ifa divination, which is a kind of a wisdom tradition and a system of divination that I learned about primarily by being the apprentice of one of its high priests back in Nigeria. Um, and I found that it has a really kind of transformative and highly effective pedagogy. The whole purpose of the Ifa tradition, it's one of kind of cosmic order. It gives kind of cosmic archetypes of what a well-ordered world should look like. And you can use the wisdom that it contains to set things right. If there's a problem, you can go to a diviner, they do divination, and then they use the very, really vast oral corpus of material that they've memorized to apply it to a specific situation or problem. And then you use that to kind of bring right order back into the situation, whether it's individual or familial or, societal and communal, whatever it might be. And that's kind of the whole goal of the system and tradition, is to help us find the positive order in the world and then bring ourselves into alignment with it. So I am working on finishing the manuscript for my first book. The book is kind of studying how the concept of religion, with its kind of modern and Western origins, didn't really apply early on. And so what were forms of worship and how are they different from religion? And then how over time did it transform from this system of forms of worship? And it's a process that's actually still ongoing and has all kinds of interesting social ramifications. But how that transition from Essene being forms of worship to something more akin to religion has resulted in the worship of the Orisha becoming the most successful indigenous African tradition that's practiced all around the world. And I'm also working on a book of Yoruba mythology, the kind of first widely accessible anthology of the Yoruba mythological world in corpus. I'm working on that with my older brother, Oludamini. The Yoruba world of mythology, because of the spread of Yoruba culture and religion specifically, is one of the most influential systems of mythology in the world. People like Beyonce, for example, have tapped into it for artistic production. But also, it's a really interesting mythological tradition because, unlike some of the other ones that people are perhaps more familiar with, at least in the Western world, like Greco-Roman mythology or maybe even Egyptian mythology and Norse mythology, it still has a huge influence and guides the political and religious and cultural lives of millions of people all over the world, not just in Africa. And because it's a living tradition, it's still constantly evolving and very dynamic and actively being told and engaged with in ways that isn't quite true of, say, like Greek mythology, because people aren't making sacrifices to Apollo that much anymore. And they're not defining their political identity around Athena, for example. But that is still very much true for Yoruba mythology. At least 40 million people on the continent of Africa have their lives guided by this mythology, and well over twice that number, I think, outside of Africa as well, have their lives deeply touched and influenced by it, and they use that mythology in very productive ways in their lives, religious and in ways that are maybe not as religious as well.